that's probably one of the top ranked questions on Google. And in 2021, I have been committed to your health and wellness, and I am doing this by bringing on experts around the world. So I have a special guest for you today who's from many hats. Under one of those hats, he likes to play with needles. Under the other hat, he tends to look at complex biology and helps simplify and accelerate results by putting formulas together in a lab coat. He's been doing acupuncture for 30 years. Mark Rippey, Mackay Rippey, welcome to the show.
Thank you, CJ.
How are you today? Sorry, I got your. I don't know why I was thinking of Mark.
Well, we work together, and Mark's the tall, good-looking one.
You're quite good-looking yourself, and welcome to the show.
I'm so excited to be here and to do an international podcast. And I hosted my own podcast for many years, and we had a few Australian guests. The subject was Lyme disease, but so I've never podcasted from the Middle East before. So it's exciting. It's amazing, this new connected world we live in, and especially with the whole. Let me just do a little aside. Last night, for the first time, and I don't know how long, I went to a public meeting where there are other human beings. We're in the same room at the same time together. It was amazing. I miss that so much. I don't know what it's like there, but here in the States, people have gotten a little bit crazy, a little bit afraid to go out, and we're just starting to get rolling.
Well, honestly, over here in Dubai, it's been nice for the longest period of time. We haven't, I mean, there are COVID restrictions. We do wear masks and we sort of like walk around. We get into meeting rooms together. There are restaurants are started on full capacity. But I must say that first 6 months where everything was shut down, having that one-on-one human connection, sharing the same amount of energy in the room, like all sorts of energies, like just sitting in front of someone, looking into someone's eye, that is magical. And I'm glad that after a very long time, it's you guys have started doing that there. Now,
Yeah, thanks.
okay, if you had $1 for every time someone asked you, do needles hurt, what sort of a life would you be living right now?
I would be with you in Dubai, basically. It's people, and the honest question is yes. In fact, there are two Chinese terms that are used, and the experts, the ancients said that the energy arrives or the practitioner gathers the qi. And it's known as the date qi sensation. And forgive my Chinese pronunciation, it's terrible, but essentially means, can you feel it?
Mhm.
And every once in a while, well, that's not true. Most of the time, the practitioner can feel it as well, sometimes a strong sensation, but almost always the patient feels it. And it is my experience over these 30 years that you need that sensation to have a successful treatment. So if you're having painless acupuncture, the acupuncture is around the point but not on the point. So that's the good and the bad news. The bad news is it hurts. The good news is that it works.
Amazing. So now, I'm sure you've answered this many times, but in the best interest of the audience, let's break. How does acupuncture really work? Like, give us a brief explanation on why someone must consider or might want to consider acupuncture as a part of their treatment.
So let's skip the whole what's happening physiologically, because we don't know yet. That's the truth. There are a lot of really smart researchers looking at brain function changing with the needles, nitric oxide levels changing locally around the needles, endorphin changes, but nobody's nailed down the mechanism. But we didn't know what aspirin was doing for decades, but we still used it successfully. So that should not be a reason to say, oh, it's not scientific. No, it's just the science hasn't caught up with 3,000 years of Chinese medicine. Now, so you have to go to the Chinese explanation. The Chinese explanation is there is a substance called qi, and it's transliterated now as qi, qi. And qi is they believe is a substance that flows through channels in the body, and you can change its velocity, you can change its volume, you can change its nature, almost tuning it like an instrument with needles and with other interventions as well, Chinese herbs, exercise like Tai Chi, Qigong, so forth and so on. And it is the disruption of this flow and balance of qi that causes illness. When we're in total harmony with the world, we're impervious to insults, mental insults, emotional insults, and physical insults. And I'm going to translate chi in a second, but I purposely held back. It gets translated as energy. It's but that's a terrible translation. We just don't have a word that begins to wrap around. Unless you're Chinese, you really have no idea what chi is. And even if you're Chinese, a modern Chinese, the chances are you don't understand it very well. There just isn't a good concept in modern languages to understand what it is that exactly they're talking about. So a lot of times people come to me, oh, you do energy medicine. Well, what's energy? Well, I get hooked up to these electrodes and I get scanned. It's like, that's not chi. That not, you may be able to measure the meridians, maybe. There's some technology that might be able to do that, but that's not traditional Chinese medicine. That's something else. It's very exciting. It's very effective. It's cool. And I believe efficacious as well. But it's not Chinese medicine. So Chinese medicine is operating on this whole other, I'm going to say system, but it's because we can't really nail down what the system. It's probably a multi-system approach. It's like what happens when you meditate? What happens when you watch the sunrise in the morning or the sunset? There's a whole slew of physiological changes that happen. And acupuncture seems to draw on many of these at the same time. So as opposed to a single medical intervention, a pharmaceutical intervention, which is going after one receptor, blocking a receptor or increasing a receptor inside a certain pathway in the body, really trying to dial down as narrowly as they can. I believe acupuncture is working on multiple levels. So that's the long answer, but I should have kept really short. So what is acupuncture used for? Acupuncture helps. It's almost like doing daily exercise, daily meditation, taking your supplements. Acupuncture at its best, one author calls it helps you nourish your destiny. How's that for a phrase? That's a phrase that comes out of an old Chinese text.
Interesting.
So yeah, it says, so at the base layer of Chinese medicine is that you fix something that's wrong. Somebody has a cold, somebody has a migraine, somebody has bowel issues, pain in the back. You fix it. The next level of expertise is you prevent the disease from happening. So you keep somebody from getting migraines, you keep them healthy. So that would be like a family practitioner who's known you over the years, keeps you more healthy than you would be otherwise. But then the master practitioner nourishes your destiny. So what does that mean? Well, we all have dreams. We all have a destiny to fulfill, our best self. And really, that's what you're all about. And that's what you're helping people realize through kind of the physical. We need healthy bodies to maintain and carry ourselves through lives, and also to house our mind so we can think clearly and not overreact or underreact and not be upset all the time. An inflamed body is going to have an inflamed mind, which is going to lead to problems. So that's in a nutshell. So anxiety, I mean, we can use it to fix things. Bottom line is we use it to fix things. I get a lot of people with anxiety, a lot of people with back pain or joint pain come in. And I get a few people who say, you know what, I like to continue with you. I want to stay healthy. I don't want to slide back. So I get people like that. I have never had anybody knock on my door and said, I'm here to nourish my destiny. But I'm hoping one day somebody will do that.
Well, if I ever come to visit you, I will use those terms. I'll be the first one to use it, or someone can beat me to it. But I really like your explanation on the concept of energy and chi and how we don't really understand. We always put everything under a blanket term But McKay, at the end of the day, whether you look at traditional Chinese medicine, you look at the ancient Ayurvedic system, and then you step onto the nuances, you look at biohacking, all of us are going towards the same point on how can someone increase cellular energy to live longer, perform better, and just live the best life. Now, you can refer to it as chi, prana. Okay, let's not use the word energy. Maybe let's use something more technical, mitochondria. All of these are somehow just acting on the same things, like, how do we get more energy? Now, let's say if someone did not have a access to an acupuncturist, or like someone like you with decades of knowledge, then what are some of the basic ways that one can increase their life force, or this energy, chi, by themselves? Is there like a certain practice, like some things that are like that you also incorporate in your life, some things that are a must?
That's a wonderfully open-ended question. Thank you. I'll take this in several different directions. So my training is rooted in ancient Chinese texts, and they fundamentally said, keep aligned with the seasons, do proper actions at proper times of years. And depending where you live, that will be different things. Somebody who's born in Dubai, somebody whose parents were born in Dubai, grandparents, great grandparents, all the way back, you're going to have a different set of genetics than somebody whose family is from Ireland. And this is one of the very interesting things, and I think this is why people like you are so very important. Is nature and human genetics sorted this out. We didn't travel that much. Maybe thousands of years ago, you go off on a war campaign, but then you come back home. People live more or less in the
Yeah.
same regions for centuries. So we adapted to our environment. Our genetics shifted. There's light-skinned people, there's dark-skinned people. There are people who thrive on mostly eating vegetables. There are people who thrive on eating seal fat, right? And blubber. And we're different. But what's happened is we've mixed that all up. So somewhere the British, we're going to blame it on the British. The British decided, you know what? We don't like it here anymore. Let's go settle. I guess the Portuguese did some too. Maybe we're going to get rich, find some gold in Central America. We're going to go get rich. And that started settlements, right? So we started moving. And for the most part, here in the US particularly, then you start getting interesting mixes of genetics. So my mother is Italian. Her family's from northern Italy. My father's family's from Ireland. So should I be eating Mediterranean diet, or should I be eating an Irish diet? And you know what? I don't think my body knows either. I'm almost 60 years old now, and thanks to people like you, like Dave Asprey, like the Weston Price Foundation, we begin to sort these things out. It's like, what should I be eating? And that's where you asked. We talked a little bit more about, I think in your intro, about supplements. Should you be taking supplements? Well, it depends. It depends. So let's go back also now. So that's just kind of where we are right now. So we have to work harder now than our great grandparents did to be healthy. At that point, you ate what you were supposed to eat during the proper times of the year. You fasted at the proper times of the year, and everybody was on the same schedule. There wasn't a whole lot of thinking, just everybody did it. So we were all biohackers back then. And then we kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater, I would say. So the
Mhm.
basics are simple things like waking, knowing what, I will say it this way, knowing what your sleep cycle is. Are you a morning lark? Do you naturally, like if you went on vacation for a month and could wake up whenever you wanted to, would you be up when the birds were chirping the first thing in the morning? Or would you be somebody who'd sleep until 9, 10? Or are you somebody who sleep past noon and stay up to 3 a.m.? So it's important. Are you morning lark? Are you a night owl? Or there's this third weird category. Not a whole lot of people in there, but they're really up all night long. Most of the night they'll fall asleep 3, 4 a.m.
Hmm.
And then to honor that, and then to get up and see the sunshine, right, and watch the sunset. The way the light hits us, the angle of the sun matters. The color of the sun matters, and their body's taking cues. It's getting reset every day by these signals. If we're like, I've got my artificial light shining on me right now so people can see me, and I see you've got your blue blockers on. That's awesome.
Yep.
Because we've
Because
got all
because
these.
I have my artificial life shining at me.
Yes, exactly. And it's not morning, so it's going to do some more damage. Because we have all these artificial inputs now, we disconnect ourselves from the normal signals that would help us stay healthy with the seasons, with the changes over time, with the changes in food. So all those signals are missing and our bodies are lost. I'll say our bodies are lost. So I would say the first thing is to sleep properly, to wake properly, and then to move your body some way. We need some sort of exercise. I believe the best exercise is walking. Just walk. And where I am, it's terrible. I have to get in the car to do anything unless I take a walk on my little farm that I have here, which that means I have to put on mud boots and it's a pain in the neck. It's dirty. But some sort of exercise, and it
Hmm.
doesn't have to be CrossFit. It doesn't. Now, I'm sure you've talked about all kinds of hacks where you can pack this in exercise into shorter periods of time. So sleep, activity, and then food. This is where things get really, really tricky, especially if you have parents from diverse backgrounds, meaning not the same backgrounds. Like, how do you sort that out? And that's a personal journey that you just have to experiment and figure out which way your genes have expressed, or which genes you inherited from which parents. And do you need more fish? Do you need less fish? Do you need more vegetables? Do you need more fruit? If I eat too much fruit, I gain weight very quickly. And that's a protective mechanism from my past somewhere so that I wouldn't starve. So that I think I'm a little bit on Irish if I got the starvation genes expressed. So I'll stop there. So those are some of my basic ideas. Now, actually, let me add in a third thing too here is almost always, and this is more of a public health message, different societies, different cultures, different, and I'll break it down even smaller, different ways that we live have different deficiencies. And again, that was something that our great grandparents had figured out. So there would be a traditional dish that everybody ate once a week, whether you liked it or not, because that's what we did. And now we have more free choice, and we've moved away from that with the modern diet. And so they're basic deficiencies that happen, whether it's we've moved inside and we're not outside in the sunshine, so a vitamin D deficiency type thing. We've all heard of zinc deficiencies now. The soil that food is grown in is just basically flat out depleted, and everything looks nice but has no nutrition in it. And then I would say it just individual, like, for example, let's just talk about iodine and the Japanese. The Japanese and the Koreans get plenty of iodine in their diets. Where I am right now, they used to call it the goiter belt in kind of this central New York into Ohio. And that's because we were landlocked. Nobody ate fish here. We stopped eating venison, which had some iodine in it, and people developed goiters, which is a thyroid problem from not enough iodine. So you have to know your own particular foibles, where your weak spots are. For some people, it might be copper. For some people, it might be vitamin C. Almost all of us now is vitamin C. And the other, potassium, man, that's another kind of like fresh fruit and vegetable source of mineral, or seaweed, something like that. But almost everybody these days is iodine deficient. And iodine, well, we can get into the weeds a little bit later. Iodine's, sorry, I switched the two. Potassium is critical. Iodine's critical too. And most of us are deficient in iodine as well. So that's, I think you need to know those things as well. So you need to know your individual status, you need to know your family status, and you need to know your cultural status as well. So if you're born in Dubai and now you're living in Minnesota, Like you need to adapt. You need to adapt to the new environment. You probably need to do things that you didn't have to do in Dubai because you're just your way of life took care of those things. In Minnesota, probably not so much. So we have mass migration here, particularly with African Americans coming from the south north, and their heart health is just so bad because they just don't get enough sunlight. They're not designed, their bodies, their skin is not designed for northern climates. But we can live wherever we want to now, and the freedom's wonderful. But with that freedom comes responsibility to handle our health. Yep, yep, yep. True. Yes. It's happened because of a comment one of my acupuncture teachers said many, many years ago. And the school I went to focused on needles, acupuncture, and not so much herbology. Matter of fact, no herbology. And in one of the clinical classes, he said, you really need to begin to learn herbs to cover the areas where needles can't work. So basically, he was saying like it's a tool. Acupuncture is a tool. It's not a cure all. There are things it can do and things it can't. If you want to be a more complete practitioner, learn herbs. And I was young and it's like, okay, thanks, Jack. I appreciate the comment, but I don't have time to learn herbs right now. I'm a young father and need to build a practice. So I'm just going to do acupuncture. So, but always in the back of mind is like, you need to learn herbs. And I never went back to study Chinese herbs. I did, however, run into a man named Robert Miller who has developed a genetic based approach to supplementation. And I met him. We hit it off. I had him on my podcast a few times. He had me speak at some of his conferences. And he said, would you like to develop a supplement for me? He said, I would like something in the nitric oxide realm. And I said, sure. So I began looking at it. And what got my interest in Bob Miller's approach, he wasn't talk. So the normal thing is for a supplement is we're just going to target one pathway, or we're going to target a public health need. Like I talk about iodine or vitamin C. We know everybody needs it. You know, there's a great study that the Cubans were all going blind decades ago, and they added vitamin A into I think the flour, and all of a sudden the blindness went away. So they're public health problems. But Bob was talking about, like they do in Chinese medicine, it's like we've got to have formulas that take into account biochemical individuality. It's like, let's look at a person's genetics, let's look how those genetics are expressing, and let's try to be a little bit more targeted in what we're doing. So his approach, just like, wow, this is the closest thing I've heard in Western medicine and supplement field that approaches, I'm not going to say is equal to, but it approaches the Chinese concept that we need to take into account not only the pathway we're trying to influence, but the terrain in which the pathway lives. It's like we have to take into account the human being. Like one of my other teachers, Bob Duckin, said, is like, I've never seen back pain walk into a room that wasn't attached to a human being. So that got me started. And through that work, I met Mark Young. And Mark Young and I, so he's a CEO of Zona, which I don't know if you're familiar with the Zona. It's a blood pressure device. It's an amazing tool. I use it myself. And we started talking about the supplement side of things, and we got excited about it. And well, where Bob is focused on practitioners, we were like, can we begin to bring some of these ideas into the supplement company without having somebody take a test, a genetic test necessarily, but with some basic understanding of biochemistry, begin to put together a supplement stack that will work for them. And so we're designing a line of supplements that are like puzzle pieces. I don't know if your audience has this, if they look on the back of their supplements that they're taking. I'll get people, I'll say, bring in your supplements. So they bring in the shopping bag full of supplements that they're either taking currently or they have in the past 6 months. And it, sometimes it's 20, 30 bottles of stuff. And you go down, you just flip the bottle around, and almost all of them have, for example, the B vitamins. So by the time they add up all the B vitamins they're taking, they're probably taking too much. Like these supplements aren't designed to work together for the most part. And so then you have to start breaking down into individual components. And then instead of having 30 bottles, you're going to have 300 bottles. And that's just ridiculous. So we're trying to, with Vitellia Life, we're trying to put together a supplement stack where you can pick and choose and be confident that you're not going to be getting too much zinc. Be confident that you're not going to be getting too much B6, because there's a sweet spot, right? There's a bell curve. There's a deficiency over here where you need to add it in. And then when you add it in, your health increases. And then there's the peak of the curve where you start adding more in and your health starts declining. And a lot of times that doesn't happen in 3 days, 7 days. It happens over a year or a couple of years. And we look back and you can't remember. It's like, oh, yes, the problem started when I added in those three formulas that overloaded me with, let's just say, zinc. You can get zinc toxicity. So that's what we're doing. Mhm. Sh- Shazandra. Shazandra. So let's start with a little background on nitric oxide. I'm not going to go too deep because it sounds like you've covered it quite well in previous episodes. But nitric oxide is created basically two ways in the body. And way number one is through enzymatic processes, and those are influenced by our genetics. And the second way is through food that we eat, ingestion of nitrites and nitrates. And most people know those because, oh my God, I'm not supposed to eat those because they're going to cause cancer. That is not accurate. I was just listening to Nathan Bryan, who's probably the world's foremost researcher in nitric oxide currently, and he just says it's just not true. It's been disproven years ago. But the, the I'm going to bust on vegans for a little bit. The vegan community really wants people to stay away from meat, so they try to scare you in various ways. So now we've got the night in America, we love bacon. We just love bacon. And there's the nitrite free. So nitrate's a preservative. So you put a little bit of nitric, sodium nitrate in there or potassium nitrate. It preserves the meat. It prevents it from going bad. We've been doing this for as long as we've had preservatives. Now they have, because we got scared, they have nitrite free bacon, and they add in instead celery salt. The celery salt has something like 10 times as much of the nitrate in it than the sodium nitrate that they use to preserve it. So it's just so much of what out there, and people like you, people like Dave, bust through these myths, right? The cholesterol myth, the fat is bad myth, the butter is bad, all this nonsense that's been put out there. So this is one more of those myths that just needs to get exploded. So anyway, long story short, so and your stomach makes nitric oxide. So it's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's essentially what happens. Nitrate gets ingested, and then the stomach acid converts the nitrite into nitric oxide. It takes off one of the oxygen molecules, and voila, now you have nitric oxide. And that pathway becomes more and more important as you get older and older. So as we age, our enzymatic functions diminish. So our natural inbred kind of what the body does for itself diminishes, and we rely more on what's going on with our diet. Now, somebody young like you, your enzymatic functions are probably going to be near 100%. They really don't start declining until we're, 40 and beyond. And it's like, that's why we age. Nitric oxide keeps your blood vessels open, flowing smoothly. And if you're not getting blood flow to an area, whether it's an organ or your skin or your brain, it's not going to function as well. It's not going to get nourished, and you're not going to clear out toxicity. So that's essentially one of the major functions. Now, nitric oxide is involved with almost every other biological function that you can think of. If you Google any function of nitric oxide, you're going to find a study that talks about it. But that's the primary function. That's one of its main functions. Our supplement gives the precursors for the enzyme and the food for the enzyme. So the citrulline is the food for the enzyme, the substrate for the enzyme, and then those B vitamins are cofactors necessary, including the zinc. You mentioned the B2. The Schizandra berry is a stimulant of the nitric oxide. So it's an herb, and it stimulates the whole encourages the endothelial nitric oxide to be expressed within the cells. So there are good studies out there showing that this berry in particular, there's some other coffee does it a little bit. So the coffee bean, and there's some others, but we like the Schisandra berry. We thought it was a nice fit in there. So the Schisandra is stimulating the circulatory system in general, and then we're feeding specifically the nitric oxide enzymes inside the endothelial cells. So that's why we have that combination there. That's a long explanation. Hopefully that wasn't too technical. Yeah. Yes. Uh, yeah. May, right. No, 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 no. Yeah, no, 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 no. That's one. So the name of the supplement is Kale Buster, and we're clearly talking to this tribe. It's like you either get the joke or you don't get the joke. And so, first of all, very quickly, the supplement itself is good quality beef liver and some K2, two forms of K2, and that's it. So it's I view that as that's your daily vitamin. You shouldn't be taking one a day. You should be taking Kale Buster. But let's talk about oxalates. Let's talk about oxalates first. And I want to start this off by a story. I had a young woman, she was a college athlete, ice hockey player, comes in. So she's 21. I think she had just turned 21 and was having pretty severe hip pain. It was her senior year, and she was a starter, and she was in danger of having to have surgery. She already had surgery on the other hip, and if she had surgery at this point in the year, she'd lose her senior season, which would just be heartbreaking for her. So we're talking, she comes in for acupuncture. So we're talking, yeah, how's it going? Tell me about your history and what's going on. What have you been eating? She said, well, I really got serious about my nutrition about 5 years ago. And I started eating lots and lots of kale. I said, oh, really? Oh, yeah. I eat it at every meal because it's a superfood and it's really, really good for me. I said, really? Oh, she said, oh, yeah. So, and you're able to get it here at the college? Oh, yeah. They have a really great salad bar. And I thinking to myself, the little red light siren goes off. And it's yelling oxalates, oxalates, oxalates. And so I tell you what, this kale might not be your best friend. Let's begin to take it out of your diet, and I'll explain why in a second. Let's begin to take it out of your diet and see how you do in a couple of weeks. So she comes back the next week, and she didn't follow my instructions. She just stopped cold turkey. Luckily, she didn't have an oxalate dump, but her pain diminished by about 80%. She had oxalate deposits in her hip that were literally damaging the tissue, either within, we don't know, we didn't do an MRI, around the hip, inside the hip. So oxalates, and that's why they're goiterogenic, oxalates bind minerals. So they can bind iron, they can bind iodine, they can bind magnesium, they can bind calcium, and they form microscopic shards. Now, we're most familiar with this with like a kidney stone is often oxalic acid. It can be other acids as well that bind and form. You can have a uric acid stone, but often they're just oxalic acid bound with calcium. And so it's not only is it an anti-nutrient that's pulling nutrients out, it also then deposits different places. It can damage your eyesight. It can damage, women can have it vaginally, and you can have vulvodynia and have painful sex because you're eating spinach or you're eating kale. It's like these aren't superfoods. It's another, I'm so sorry if you're vegan out there, it's another vegan vegetarian propaganda piece. Now, there's nothing wrong with occasional kale. And if it's cooked a little bit, some of the oxalates come out, but not all. We're not animals. And if you have particular genes, you're also more susceptible to oxalates. And if you have a dysbiosis in your gut, so we have oxalobacteria that digest the oxalates. But if you've been on a bunch of antibiotics, or just for whatever reason got sick, or just weren't colonized with a lot of those when you were little, you don't handle them as well. So this goes back to your bio-individuality or your cultural bio-individuality. That's really, like you said beautifully before, the individuality of your gut. So kale in general is just not something you should be buying bales of and combining it into a smoothie, no matter what they're telling you. And the same goes for spinach. Spinach is right there. We could have called it Spinach Buster, but it's not as good a name. It doesn't have quite the reputation. So kale, spinach, almonds, full of oxalate, and other nuts as well. The almond milk, most of that gets processed out, so you don't have to worry about that. Beets are like, oh, the new nitric oxide. Everybody just eat beets. High in oxalate, so you got to watch that as well. And then things like rhubarb, but no, that's not that's kind of a local thing. Rhubarb isn't as popular, I think, worldwide. Yeah, we have rhubarb out in our garden too. So my father-in-law loves it. He makes a little jelly out of it and puts it on his ice cream. So that's that's the story behind Kale Buster. It's like, that should not be your foundation. Beef liver is actual superfood. The small fish you were talking about from the Norwegians, sardines, anchovies, that's a superfood. Kale, no way. And a lot of those minerals also, well, it's high in protein. Really, for a plant, it's like you're not going to get your protein. You know how much kale you'd have to eat to get your protein needs, especially if you're young and growing. Once you're mature, your protein needs aren't that high, so you can probably get by. But it's criminal when you see parents forcing their little kids to live on a vegan diet. You're not going to thrive. They don't literally can't get the nutrition. Or people who put their dogs on a vegetarian diet. It's just there's it's just hard. Yeah, I'll just stop there again. And so what we have here, we have the bell curve as well. A lot of times when people start vegetarian diet, and I'm all for like a period of time of fasting, whether you do no food, a water fast, or go carnivore for a couple months, or go vegetarian for a few months, you start cleaning up and maybe replacing some problems. One of the things you're replacing with a high vegetarian diet is the nitrates you're probably not getting in your diet. So your nitric oxide levels are going to improve through this the stomach pathway that we talked about. So what happens is you feel better. You move to this diet, you feel better. You probably cut out a lot of junk from your diet. You do other health things. And then 2 or 3 years later, when you start to get deficient, when you start, your reserves are gone, your health starts to decline. And you'll see this in long-term vegetarians, long-term vegans, is there's, I just don't feel, they just don't have the energy. There's something going on. So then you look for all these other crazy ideas and problems. And you forget that 5 years ago, you went vegetarian, and that's a problem because it felt so good in the first 6 months, in the first 3 months. So we have to watch that no matter what intervention we're doing. We have to watch that. And that includes things like exercise. You can over exercise and it can burn you out. You can add in a supplement, something like Kale Buster. If for some reason you can't do beef liver, I can't imagine why, but let's use it as an example. You take it for the first year and you feel great, and then all of a sudden things change. So it's important to track what you're doing, cycle through things, keep experimenting. When you find things that really lock in, that when you take them away, you feel worse, and when you feel better when you put them on, your body's craving those things. You should, except for a few things that I think we need to take as defense, you should feel better taking a supplement. You should see the needle move, which goes back to your kind of nitric oxide story. You're not going to get a lot of boost from the nitric oxide supplement because you're maxed. The time to start taking that when you're 30, 35, to keep those enzymes going as long as we can, and then to begin to supplement in other ways through the diet or through other supplements. Yeah. Yeah. Carnitine. They're, they're cheap. Yep. Mhm. So if we kind of borrow from the paleo mindset and some of the stories that they tell, we could also attribute Weston A. Price and the Weston Price Foundation for kind of bringing this. Beef liver used to be a weekly part of the American diet, and it just it has a certain smell to it. It has a certain acquired. If you're going to eat it like that, when we have we have a very small herd of cows, and we have one butchered about every year. We have the liver ground up and put in the ground beef. So it's about 10% liver and 10% muscle meat. And if you also go back even farther in time, when the men went out to hunt, they would gut the carcass and they would eat organs. They would eat the intestines, they would eat what was inside the intestines, and this was to recover from the physical exertion of the hunt. Those are the most nutrient rich parts of the animal. Muscle meat has a lot of creatine, has a lot of certain, but it doesn't have the nutrition, the minerals, the micronutrients nearly as much. It has lots of protein. And so the valuable part of the animal is the interior, the heart, the liver, the kidneys, the thymus. What there might be. Oh, boo. What do I need to do? I'm in private chat. Am I back?